Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing something a little different today, something you guys specifically requested actually. We're taking a deep dive into anxiety.
Yeah, it's a topic that comes up a lot.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think a lot of us struggle with, trying to figure out like what's normal, what's not,
Yeah.
and when do we actually need to like do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've been digging through the research that you sent over,
Yeah.
and let me tell you, some really fascinating stuff came up.
Yeah.
So maybe we can just jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So one of the things that really stood out to me, and I'm curious to get your take on this, is this idea that anxiety itself isn't actually a bad thing. Like it's a natural response. What's up with that?
It's so true. And it's interesting how much anxiety gets a bad rap, right?
Yeah.
Because people, I think, just immediately associate it with being this negative thing. But, going back, way back to, our early ancestors, you can see how it was actually essential for survival.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, imagine you're facing down like a saber-toothed tiger.
A little anxiety would probably be helpful at that point.
Yeah, exactly. A little anxiety is what's going to make you, run for your life, get out of that dangerous situation. So it's really in our DNA to have that response.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So then how does that translate to today's world? Because most of us, thankfully, are not, dodging predators on a daily basis. So why do we still experience anxiety in our modern lives?
Well, the mechanism is the same, but the triggers are different. So think about it, right? That feeling you get, those like knots in your stomach before a big presentation or a job interview,
Oh yeah.
that's anxiety. But it's actually there to help you. It's your body's way of saying like, hey, pay attention, this is important. It can actually help you focus, sharpen your memory, even speak more clearly. So it's like your body is giving you this extra boost to help you perform at your best.
Interesting. So it's almost like that nervous energy can actually work in our favor.
Absolutely, yeah. In those situations, anxiety is your friend, not your enemy.
I like that. I'm already starting to see anxiety in a whole new light here. But then how do we know when it crosses that line, right? I mean, we've all felt those everyday jitters, but when does it become something more serious, like an anxiety disorder?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? And the research actually makes a clear distinction between those everyday nerves and what constitutes a disorder. And, one helpful way to think about it is the intensity, the duration, and the impact that it's having on your life.
So it's not just about how strong those feelings are in the moment,
Huh.
but also like how long they last and then, whether it's actually messing with your life.
Precisely. Like imagine, feeling nervous before a first date. That's normal, right? We've all been there. But if that nervousness turns into this overwhelming dread that prevents you from even, leaving the house for weeks, that's different. That might be a sign of social anxiety disorder.
So it's about the intensity, how long it lasts, and if it's actually preventing you from like living your life.
Exactly. Think of it this way. Normal anxiety is like a visitor. It pops in, says hello, and then it heads on its way. An anxiety disorder. That's more like that house guest that just won't leave.
Oh, I know that house guest.
We all do.
And then what about that impact part of the equation? How would someone know if their anxiety is actually preventing them from, doing the things they want to do or need to do in their life?
Yeah, and the research uses some powerful language here, talking about this idea of it affecting someone's ability to function in their daily life. So ask yourself, can you still go to work? Can you maintain relationships? Are you able to enjoy your hobbies? If anxiety is preventing you from doing the things that you normally would, that's a major red flag.
It's like you can really mess with your life if it gets to that point.
It absolutely can. And it's not just about, how it feels mentally and emotionally. The research also highlights how anxiety disorders can manifest physically.
Oh, interesting. So it's not all in your head, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. It can really impact your body, too. We're talking like heart palpitations, dizziness, even trouble breathing.
Wow. I think a lot of people might just brush those off as like separate physical issues and not even realize that they could be connected to anxiety.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's easy to miss the connection. And it's important to remember that, like, under this umbrella of anxiety disorders, there are actually several different variations.
So it's not just like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
No, not at all. You've got generalized anxiety disorder or GAD, where someone's kind of dealing with this, like, constant free-floating worry, about a whole bunch of different things. And then there's panic disorder, which involves these sudden and often really intense panic attacks.
Those sound pretty scary to experience.
Yeah, they can be really debilitating for sure. And then you've got phobias, which are, those intense fears of specific things or situations.
Like being afraid of spiders or heights or even like social situations.
Exactly. Those are all, yeah, common examples. And then we've got obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, which, is often misunderstood, I
Oh,
think.
yeah, for sure.
It's not just about like, being super organized, as some people might think. It's really about these intrusive thoughts or obsessions and then compulsions, which are these repetitive behaviors that someone feels like they have to do to kind of like manage those thoughts.
So it's a lot more complex than just like liking things to be tidy.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot more going on there. And of course, we can't forget about post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, which can happen after someone experiences a traumatic event.
Right, right. It sounds like, yeah, there's a whole spectrum of anxiety disorders out there. So, okay, if someone's listening to this and thinking like, okay, this sounds kind of familiar, this might be me, what are some of the most effective ways to actually address it? Because we've talked a lot about understanding anxiety, but what about the doing something about it part?
That's really where the rubber meets the road, right? And the research is really clear that the first and most important step is talking to a healthcare professional.
Yeah.
That could be a therapist, a counselor, your doctor. It's really like getting a checkup for your mental health.
Yeah, it can be so helpful to like get that outside perspective.
It can. And depending on what's going on, they might recommend therapy, medication, or a combination of both.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
When it comes to therapy, are there any like specific approaches that are particularly helpful for dealing with anxiety?
Yeah, one that comes up a lot in the research, and for good reason, is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
And it's fascinating how it works because it really focuses on that connection between your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
See, and that's what I find so interesting, this whole idea of how our thoughts can influence our feelings. Because sometimes it's like we don't even realize that we're thinking these negative thoughts, but they're like constantly playing in the background and affecting how we feel.
Yeah, it's like they're running the show without us even realizing it. And so CBT helps you like identify those negative thought patterns that might be fueling your anxiety and then teaches you how to, challenge them and reframe them.
So you're basically learning to like change the way you react to those anxious
Ah,
thoughts.
exactly. So like imagine this. You're running late for work because you're stuck in traffic. Now, a negative thought pattern might be, oh my God, I'm going to be so late. My boss is going to be furious. I'm going to get fired. And suddenly, you're spiraling, right?
Mm.
CBT would say, okay, hold on a second. Let's pause. Let's challenge that thought.
Mhm.
Is that thought really true? And even if it's possible, is it helpful to think that way? And then you start replacing those thoughts with something more balanced, like, okay, traffic is out of my control. I can send a quick message letting my boss know I'm running late. It's about, reframing those thoughts in a way that reduces that anxiety.
Wow, that's such a practical example of how it can help.
Right.
So it's not just about like putting a Band-Aid on the problem. It's actually giving you the tools to like manage it in the long term.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the goal. And beyond therapy, there are also a lot of really great stress reduction techniques that can be super effective.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like what are some things that people can start doing, like today to kind of manage those anxious feelings?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like therapy, that's great, but sometimes you just need something right now.
Exactly. And there's some fantastic techniques you can try. Mindfulness and meditation have become really popular and for good reason. They can really help calm your nervous system, kind of bring you back to a place of peace.
Yeah, mindfulness. That's one of those things where I'm always like, okay, is it really as simple as it sounds? Like, what do you actually do?
Right. Well, it's really about, being present in the moment, paying attention to your thoughts and feelings, but without judgment. Like, even if you just take a few minutes each day to focus on your breath, that can make a huge difference.
Okay, that seems doable, right? Like you can kind of do that anywhere.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be this big, complicated thing.
What about like those moments when you really need to like de-stress quickly? Are there any like quick tips for that?
Absolutely. Deep breathing exercises can be incredibly effective. Have you ever heard of box breathing?
Box breathing. I don't think so.
So it's this really simple technique that's actually used by like first responders and athletes. You inhale for a count of 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold again for 4.
Okay, so it's like a square, breathing in a square.
Exactly. And it's easy to remember even when you're feeling stressed.
That's really helpful. And, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the power of like connecting with other people.
Oh, absolutely. Social support is so important, Talking to friends, family, a therapist, even joining a support group, it can make a world of difference.
Hmm.
Just remember, you're not alone in this.
Right. And sometimes just hearing that, just knowing that other people get it, that can be so helpful.
For sure.
So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from like what anxiety even is to like how do you know if it's something more serious and then most importantly like what can you actually do about it. So for someone who's listening to all this, what's the one thing you really want them to take away from this whole conversation?
I think it's just so important to remember that anxiety is a normal human experience. It's okay to feel anxious sometimes. It's part of what makes us human. But if it's starting to control your life, if it's preventing you from doing the things you want to do, please don't suffer in silence. There's help out there, and you deserve to live a life that's not ruled by anxiety.
Yes, 1,000%. There's no shame in asking for help. In fact, I think it takes a lot of courage to actually reach out and say, you know what, I need some help with this.
Couldn't agree more.
So before we wrap up, we've been focusing on like individual experiences with anxiety, but I do have one final thought, kind of based on everything we've been talking about. Do you think that like our culture, the fact that we're always on, always connected, everything's so fast paced, could that be playing a role in anxiety as well?
It's definitely something to think about, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot to unpack there, for sure.
It's interesting. Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into anxiety. We hope you feel, a little more informed,
Yeah,
maybe a little more empowered to take charge of your well-being.
absolutely.
Until next time.